You know that feeling, right? That knot in your stomach when you're scrolling through the news, even when the big stories are happening thousands of miles away. It's this constant global tension. It feels like the whole world is on edge. So why? Today, we're going to dig into a really fascinating idea called the Darius Framework that might just explain what's going on.
It's a real puzzle, isn't it? You could be living somewhere totally peaceful, and yet that strain, that stress, it just seems to find you. It shows up in the news, sure, but also in prices at the store, in conversations, just this general feeling of unease. So what's the hidden network? What's carrying this tension all over the globe? Okay, so a huge part of the answer is pretty simple. There is more conflict in the world. The numbers on violence, on displacement, they're tough to look at. But that's not the whole story, not even close. There's something else going on, another layer that takes the raw impact of these events and just amplifies it, spreading that feeling of strain way, way beyond the actual front lines. To really get our heads around this modern problem, we actually have to go back in time, like way back. We're talking about the ancient Persian king Darius. Turns out he was onto something, identifying a core set of threats that have been tearing societies apart for thousands of years.
So Darius pointed to this timeless triad of threats. First, you've got the brutal, straightforward reality of war, destruction, chaos, the end of any feeling of safety. Second, there's the creeping existential threat of drought, a water shortage that can choke a civilization. And third, you have the insidious power of the lie, misinformation that just poisons trust and makes everyone paranoid. For centuries, that's been the deadly recipe for collapse.
But in our world, right now, there's a fourth element. One that has woven itself through those original three, acting like a hidden amplifier. And that element, it's energy.
Now, this is the key idea right here. Energy isn't some new, separate evil. Think of it more like the nervous system of our modern world. I mean, modern war is often about hitting energy infrastructure, right? Our water systems are totally dependent on energy to even work, and misinformation, the lie, man, that can spread like wildfire when energy systems are used to control information. Energy is basically the delivery system that brings all these global pressures right to our doorstep.
Okay, so how do we get a grip on all this? How can we possibly measure not just what's happening, but the burden, the weight of it all? Well, the Darius Framework gives us a couple of really smart tools to do exactly that.
First up, we have something called the real conflict quantity, or RCQ for short. This is the objective stuff, the hard data. We're talking about the number of violent events, how many people have been displaced, how much disruption there is to essential services like power and water. It basically answers the question, what is actually happening on the ground?
But that's only half the picture. The other tool is the Imposing-Strain Multiplier, or ISM. And this is the subjective part. This is what measures how all that objective stuff gets amplified by things like uncertainty, propaganda, and that awful feeling that you have absolutely no control over your life. This is the fear factor. It's what explains why the experience of a conflict can feel so much bigger than the direct physical threat. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. On the left, you've got the hard facts of RCQ, the stuff you can count. But over on the right, you have the human experience of ISM, the stuff you feel. It's that gnawing anxiety of not knowing what's next, the powerlessness of having your choices taken away, and that really deep feeling that this isn't just news, it's a threat to who you are. It's the gap between what is happening and what it feels like is happening.
And boom, here it is, the heart of the whole framework. The total strain we actually experience isn't just one or the other. It's the real conflict quantity multiplied by the Imposing-Strain Multiplier. You see? A pretty small conflict can feel absolutely overwhelming if lies and uncertainty are everywhere. And a really intense conflict can, over time, feel almost normalized if that multiplier is low. This simple little equation completely changes how we look at global tension. So now that we have this incredibly powerful formula, let's actually apply it. Let's see what happens when we use it to look at the real world. Turns out, we can map 4 totally distinct patterns of how societies are experiencing conflict today. As you can see here, we've got these 4 regimes: turbulence, plateau, spikes, and stability. Each one is just a different combination of high-low conflict and a high-low strain multiplier. And each one creates a completely different kind of, let's call it an emotional landscape for the people living in it. Let's break them down real quick. First, you have turbulence. This is the absolute worst-case scenario. You've got high real conflict and a super high multiplier.
This is active war, plus power outages, plus constant rumors flying around, plus that terrifying feeling of having no idea what's going to happen next. The strain here is massive, and it's totally unpredictable.
Next up is the plateau. Here, the actual conflict is still high, but that multiplier is low. How does that happen? Well, it happens in these chronic, long-term conflicts where the danger just becomes normalized. People adapt. They build routines. They develop a kind of emotional numbness just to survive. The strain is still dangerously high, but it's a heavy, flat line, not a series of crazy peaks and valleys.
And this brings us right back to the question we started with. The spikes regime is where the actual on-the-ground conflict is low, but the strain multiplier is sky high. This is where you get those sharp, sudden shocks of anxiety from doom-scrolling the news. It's when you feel the very real economic pain of a war happening on the other side of the planet. This is exactly how global tension makes its way into our lives, even when we're nowhere near the fighting. Which, of course, brings us right back to that critical amplifier, energy. Because right now, in the 21st century, there are all these new demands being placed on our energy systems, and they're creating entirely new sources of strain we've never seen before. And we're not just talking about keeping the lights on anymore. We're talking about a whole new class of power-hungry industries. Just think about the absolutely massive server farms needed to train and run AI, or the global data centers that basically store our entire digital lives, running 24/7, or the incredibly intense process of crypto mining. All of these are putting a completely unprecedented demand on our electrical grids, and that's creating a new kind of tension. Just look at this number. Get your head around this. The International Energy Agency is projecting that by 2030, data centers alone could be using over 1,000 terawatt-hours of electricity a year. That is more than the entire current energy consumption of many countries. This is not some abstract future problem. This has real local impacts on grid stability and on the price you pay for power. Now, here's the really wild part. You might think the countries most vulnerable to this new kind of strain are the ones with an energy shortage. Nope. In fact, it's often the energy-rich nations that are at the greatest risk. Why? It's simple, really. Cheap, subsidized electricity makes them a magnet for these power-hungry industries. And when you have a situation where a few powerful companies are getting rich while ordinary people are getting blackouts, you've got a perfect recipe for serious social unrest. So when you put all of these pieces together, the ancient threats, the modern amplifier of energy, and all these crazy new demands on the system, you get to a final, really crucial insight, and it's all about control. So look, if there's one single thing you take away from all this, let it be this. Energy is so much more than just fuel. It is the nervous system of our modern world. It is the network that transmits the shocks of global events, from a war zone to a trading floor to a server farm, and delivers them directly into our homes. And that leaves us with a really big question, doesn't it? If our energy system really does act like a global nervous system, transmitting all this shock and strain everywhere, then who should be in control of it? Who gets to decide where the pain falls? And who profits from all that pressure? That's definitely something worth thinking about.